Are you fooling yourself? The goal of recovery is to become better, stronger, wiser. It's to have a better life and perhaps a better marriage. But at least it's personal. It's about becoming a better person. But to achieve that goal, we have to be honest with ourselves about ourselves, who we truly are. The Serenity Prayer says, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. But in my experience through the years, what I find is that we tend to try to accept the things we could change and change the things that we really need to accept. For instance, I really want to try to change Stephanie, but that's really something I can't do. But I'm really willing to accept my foibles. Maybe I don't even see them because of self-deception, when really that's the one thing I could change to make my life better. Often in my office, when someone comes in, I say, what do you want to work on today? And so often they start talking about their mate and how their mate needs to be different so that ultimately they could be okay. And when someone answers by talking about what they want to change in themselves, I know that person's not only taking responsibility for themselves, but they're about to grow and to move forward into something totally new. But when what they want is their mate to be different, I know that that person has their own self-deception. I'm not saying that their mate may not have a lot of problems, but the only thing they ultimately control is them. I once had a mentor when I was first out of undergraduate school. Her name was Inez, and Inez was astounding. And I remember a situation where there was a doctor. We were working at an adoption agency, and Inez was probably in her 60s. And this doctor was upset about something with Inez, and he was berating her, and he was yelling at her. And I was a young buck at the time. I was probably 22 or 23, and I want to take it outside, and just, I'm ready to, plow into the doctor, and we're going to go to fisticuffs. But behind her back, Inez is just kind of doing her hand like this. The doctor can't see it, but I can, telling me just to be quiet, be quiet. And finally, the doctor just gets so angry, he storms out of the office. And then I started yelling at Inez, and I said, what do you mean? Why didn't you defend us? I'm going on, and she's going, whoa, whoa. She said, hang on. The whole time he was talking, I just kept thinking, what in the world could be wrong? What's wrong with him? She was just concerned about him. It's like she had learned not to take something personal. And I thought, that's how I want to be when I grow up. Because what if you could be in control of your own responses regardless of the other person? All of us have blind spots. That's what we're referring to this week in terms of self-deception. And the problem with self-deception is we're unable to see our problem. C.S. Lewis says that all saints must keep one nostril keenly attuned to their own inner cesspool, because it's natural for us to see the problem out there, but unable to really see what the problem is inside of us. To make truly rational and objective judgments and decisions would require an immense amount of analysis in situation after situation, which just isn't feasible. Therefore, we as human beings take these mental shortcuts called heuristics. And while heuristics, those assumptions that we make, can speed our problem-solving process and our judgments, they also can induce some errors. And I want to look at what some of those thinking errors can be that distort our ability to see ourselves. During the 1970s, two psychologists, Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman, presented their research on cognitive biases that influenced how we make judgments. A cognitive bias is a systematic error in thinking that affects our decisions and judgments that we make of self and of others, and actions that we're going to take. And what I'd like to do is invite you to consider the possibility that perhaps you're biased in the way that You look at yourself. Maybe you don't see yourself realistically, and perhaps you're even biased in some of the ways you look at your mate and others. So here are a few cognitive biases that distort our thinking while recovering from infidelity. The first is confirmation bias, and that's favoring information that conforms to what you believe to be true, and we discount evidence that doesn't conform. And sometimes at seminars, to just show how much confirmation bias impacts us, I would give people a personality test before the seminar began. And then at lunch, they would all go pick up the results from the personality inventory. And after lunch, I would ask them, how many of you feel like that that test accurately reflected who you are? And usually it was somewhere between 85 and 90% of people would raise their hand and say, that's exactly how I am. And then I would say, okay, would you be surprised to find out that I gave everybody the exact same results from that test? Nobody has a different set of results. You all got the same thing. You can compare and look. I said it's an old con artist trick, because we as human beings, when we read something, we look to confirm what's true about us, and we just automatically discount the stuff that doesn't seem to fit us. And it's that confirmation bias that can distort how we see ourselves, but it can also distort how you see your mate at this point. Because perhaps all you're looking for are the things that confirm the negative beliefs you now hold about your mate, or perhaps about yourself. And in that sense, you really don't see them realistically. The second cognitive bias is the self-serving bias. And that's the tendency to blame external forces when bad things happen, and to give yourself credit when good things happen. We use this bias to protect our own self-esteem, and it really will deceive us in terms of how we see us. If there's a good interaction between you and your mate, you'll probably tell yourself how well you did at controlling yourself, and you'll pat yourself on the back. On the other hand, if things go badly, it's going to be the other person's fault. If they had only been doing this, if they had acted this way, you would have, so you'll blame it on them, but you won't look at what maybe you did wrong. Another one is the actor-observer bias. This is the tendency to attribute your own actions to external causes while attaching other people's behaviors to internal causes. When you're an actor in a situation, as you view yourself just as the person in there, it's difficult to see our actions. But when we look through the role of an observer, when we see another person, it's easy to witness their actions. For instance, let's say that you and your mate have a fight. In this type of bias, if you have a meltdown in that interaction, we'll blame our mate's behavior for why we did what we did. If they had been acting the right way, I would have never done this. If they had said the right thing, I wouldn't have had to respond like that. But the observer part of us looks at them, and we attribute internal motivation to them. They did that because they were insensitive. It wasn't because anything I did. It wasn't about external circumstances. This is an internal issue for them. It's external for me. Another example, if I want more affection from Stephanie in our relationship and then Steph doesn't give it, then she's going to be cold and insensitive. It's her bad, right? But if she wants more affection from me and I'm not responding, it's because she's too needy. It's easy how we can blame somebody else to avoid really looking at our issues. And I say all of this in hopes of just getting you to question how you see things. We humans, we like to applaud our ability to be rational and to think that we're seeing things objectively, reasonably, but in reality, that's not the case at all. We all have tendencies to overestimate our rationality to the point of even denying reality. If you want to learn more about cognitive biases, I'd recommend a simple little book. It's like 32 pages long, called 25 Cognitive Biases, uncovering The Myth of Rational Thinking by Charles Holm. I love the Pogo quote that says, "We've met the enemy, and the enemy is us." I said at the beginning, that the point of recovery is to become better and stronger and wiser, to have a better life, to get a new marriage. But it really begins with me being able to see what are my defects of character, what perhaps might need to change. And that takes keeping that one nostril keenly attuned to my own inner cesspool. And to do that, we have to move out of self-deception and take personal responsibility for our issues. Then we can become better people to healing.